welcome to another happy hour brought to you by NAAP, the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to build unity in the adoption community and elevate our voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connection. My name is Marcy Keithley. I'm a board member and host for the evening, along with Jennifer Falsing, assisting in the Zoom room. And let's see what board members we have with us tonight. Beth Story is here. I don't see anybody else right now. Okay, so Beth, you can wave and say hello. At this time, if you haven't already, please make sure that you have placed yourself on mute. And again, say hello in the chat bar and introduce yourself. Just a little disclosure here to remind you of that. And if you do have a question, you can raise your virtual hand, or you're welcome to ask a question in the chat bar and Jennifer will monitor that. This is a reminder that it's a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. And portions of this event are recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. If you're experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional, or you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Okay, so I'm honored to introduce this evening's guest. Her name is Yael Adler, and I'd just like to tell you just a little bit about her. She is a Romanian adoptee who wrote a book called From Gypsy to Jersey that shares her uplifting personal story in the hopes of inspiring and helping other adoptees who want to learn more about their past and uncover their roots. She looks back at the conditions in the country around the time of her birth, with the fall of dictator Nicolae Ceausescu and the collapse of communism, a period where nearly 100,000 abandoned children were living in neglect in institutions across Romania. She learned on ABC 2020 television series on Romanian orphanages, gave her parents the courage to pursue a private adoption. She has a bachelor's degree in journalism and is currently director of marketing for Thrive Alliance Group, a company that implements mental health support services for public school districts. She's married and the mother of 3, and her family live and reside in New Jersey. She enjoys being active in the adoption community and savors every opportunity to listen and learn from other adoptees, adoptive parents, and birth families. So everyone, please welcome Yael.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for spending your Friday night with me. I think it's important to share some context on, what was really going on in the country even before I was born, because that really plays a significant role in my adoption story. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of background. I think it was around 1974 when a man by the name of Nicolae Ceausescu, he ruled the country as a communist leader or dictator. And what he did was he implemented these really harsh policies that basically it was in an effort to increase Romania's communist population to appear more powerful. And what happened was he put enormous pressure on women to have children. And abortions were illegal, contraceptives were illegal. And while that was happening, there was also this really large foreign debt. So what he did was he exported all of Romania's resources. So people were living on essentially nothing at the time. And women were incredibly desperate. They didn't know what to do. They were going to all sorts of extremes. They were trying to self-abort, which was obviously incredibly dangerous. Some women died from doing this. They were taking children to the local orphanages. There was speculation at the time that children were even being sold for survival money, which is what somebody told me in a conversation, someone who actually lived during communist Romania times. And basically, people had nothing to live on, and they were incredibly desperate. And these circumstances really led to a series of devastating events for children and their families in Romania. And in 1989, which was actually the year that I was born, it marked the fall of communism, where Ceausescu and his wife were executed during the Romanian Revolution. And things didn't just change, the country was still in shambles. People were living in complete poverty. And there were thousands of children who were left without families. And it was then that in the early 90s, ABC's 2020, with Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs, they put out this broadcast series, actually shedding light on Romania and all of the things that were going on there. And they focused mostly on orphanages, but there was a segment that actually focused on private adoptions. And it was this segment that my parents were watching one night. And that is basically how they learned about the attorney, who they eventually contacted to handle my adoption. So in the early 90s, that is really the reason why there was a spike in adoptions in Romania. And I was adopted in the year 1991 at the age of 2. And people from all over were fleeing to Romania because they were hearing about what was going on and all of these children who didn't have families. And so what happened was my parents, they reached out to ABC, the station, and they got the name of an attorney who didn't live too far away. He was right in Philadelphia. And they had a conversation with him. And he said, let me get back to you in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be taking a trip there. So they waited and waited. And my parents had actually experienced a prior failed adoption, which was going to be a domestic adoption in Texas. And the birth mother had a change of heart. So I'm sure you can imagine what my parents were feeling. They were so anxious to hear back from this attorney. And when they finally did, they were sent a video that showed me in Romania, living with my birth mother, the home that we lived in. And they, of course, had no hesitation, and they wanted to move forward with the adoption. And that was really what started the journey for them and for me. And at age 2, I came to the States, and that's where kind of things began. Fast forward a bunch of years later, around my 30th birthday, I was helping my mother clean out her apartment to put it up for sale. And that's when I came across this large binder of documents. And what I realized was that it was this treasure trove of information. For the first time in my life, I was seeing things that I had never seen before. I saw a court document that began to tell a story that I never knew. I saw my birth name, which was Adriana. I saw my birth mother's name, my birth father's name, just details about when I was born and all of these things. And it just, at that moment in time, I knew that I really wanted to piece together the parts of my story. So what I did was I reached out to that attorney. I did a simple Google search and believed to have found him. And I was very direct about it. I sent an email with the subject line, "I believe you were involved in my Romanian adoption." And only a few hours later, I actually received an email saying that I'm going to give you a call shortly. So I got a phone call from the attorney, and I couldn't believe it. I was actually speaking to the attorney who handled my adoption 28 years before. So it was pretty unreal, and he offered to provide any help and support that he could, which he did. And that led to a series of events that were pretty life-changing. I was able to conduct a birth family search, and I was able to go into reunion. And this was all about 2.5 years ago now. And that's kind of how it started.
Does anybody have any questions to start off with? Okay, we'll let you keep going here.
We'll just keep on going then. So what was interesting about my findings was that, growing up, I always knew that I was adopted. But it wasn't until later that I actually really uncovered all of the details of my adoption. Oh, do we have a question?
We have two. Let's see. Ms. Harris, I don't want to butcher your name. I'm sorry.
It's Chia Salam. And so I guess my question is, so you lived with your birth mother and not in an orphanage when your parents found out about you, or you were in an orphanage?
So I was never in an orphanage setting. I actually lived with my birth mother for the first 2 years of my life. And it was told to me that she was actually approached. At that time, people who were living in villages in Romania, social workers and attorneys alike, they knew families and women who were struggling. And it was communicated to me that she was approached and basically asked the question, I see you're really struggling. Is adoption something that you would consider? And it was something that she thought about long and hard. She wanted to know if she would be able to meet the people who were going to adopt me and if she would learn to find out information. And she asked all these questions and she sat on that for some time. And then when she was approached again, she had made the decision to put me up for adoption. And that was not an easy decision for her. We were living in a 1-bedroom home with no running water. I actually discovered that I have a birth sister who was not put up for adoption. And we were really struggling. My birth father was very abusive. He abused alcohol, he abused her to the point where she had physical problems from the abuse. And it just was not an environment that she wanted. It was just not an environment that she wanted me to be in. And my birth sister's family actually helped take care of her a little bit more. She actually had a different birth father, so she was technically a half sister. So her biological father's family was a little bit more involved, helped out a little bit more in terms of raising her. So she wasn't around that environment as much, but it was just getting to be too much for her physically, financially, emotionally. And she had made the difficult decision to put me up for adoption. But a big piece of my findings was that I found out that I belonged to the Roma or Gypsy community, which was really a huge finding for me because that wasn't something that was ever disclosed. It was something that I found out on my own. And it was just to know, to be able to learn about that and connect with your roots, I think is just something that's so important. And it filled a void really that I never even knew existed. And I think it's just so important to acknowledge, where you come from and connect with that in some way. And I was able to do that not only through my trip, but also not only through meeting my birth family, but also through visiting the sites in Romania. I was able to see the hospital where I was born. I was able to go to the courthouse where my adoption was legalized. I was able to visit all of these sites, and that in itself was just such a fulfilling experience for me. And it actually brings up, there's a little excerpt from my book where I actually describe that moment in time where I'm visiting all of these sites. So I'd love to share that with you. It's very short. Let me find it, bear with me. Okay. As we drove, I became less tense and was looking forward to seeing some of the sights. Our first stop was Arad, where we found parking on the congested, narrow streets and landed right in front of the courthouse. It was a pretty beige 3-story building with white columns and capital gold letters across it. As I stood in front of the courthouse, I had my photo taken. I imagined what that day must have been like for my parents. I pictured them walking in thinking the day we had been waiting for has finally come, knowing that they were only steps away from having a family. The next stop was the maternity hospital of Arad, the place where I was born. I could not walk up to it like the courthouse because there was a fence around the perimeter of the building. But from a distance, I saw the large white building with many square framed windows. And as I looked at it, I pictured Daniela going into labor and holding me for the first time. I could see her looking at me with a lot of love in her heart, the same way she had looked at me many times on this trip. I could only imagine the level of stress she was under when she had me, thinking of having to raise 2 children on her own. I wondered if the stress she felt outweighed the happiness and what was going through her head when she took me home that day. I just wanted to share that with you. It was a really moving part of my trip, getting to see all of those sites that were relevant to my adoption. And I think that's great if people can connect with where they came from in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
We do have another question. Sharon?
Yes, I wanted to thank you first for coming and sharing your story with us. But our daughter-in-law is from Romania. She came here in 2004. And so she's been here ever since. And she's a PA now at the hospital, local hospital. I will share your book with her. She'll, because I hear all these stories about Romania all the time. And I've heard so many stories similar to what you have described.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for and coming on tonight, and listening to me.
Thanks.
Was there another question, Marcy, did you say?
I think you answered, unless David, unless you have another comment, you had your hand up earlier, but I think your question was answered, but you might want to say hello.
I have a question too, please.
I know.
Yeah, you did answer my question. Thank you, Yael. And like I've lived in New York and I was born in New Jersey, but for whatever reason, I didn't live that far from where I was born, but for whatever reason, Wednesday night, I was visiting some friends in Montclair, New Jersey, and then I was taking the bus home, and the bus went past the hospital that I was born. And it was just like, like you said, there was just this feeling, this good feeling to connect somehow to that. I don't know why I had never been there before. I mean, I grew up near there. I could have easily gone there, but right. Yeah, it was a good feeling. So I could relate.
Yeah, there's something very special about that. And just seeing, I was talking about that very thing with somebody and people outside the adoption community, they think, okay, well, like, why do I care about the hospital where I was born? That's not a big deal. That's not exciting for me to go visit. But for someone who's adopted, to see where they were actually born is a huge deal. So I'm so grateful that I was able to do that. And I'm glad that you had that experience as well. So thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, David, and good to see you. Okay, Linda Hullett has a question.
Hi there. Hi. Sorry, I'm in a red room, so it's kind of an odd background. So this may be an odd question. I hear it more in adoption circles now in 2021, but did your adoptive parents consider helping your mother versus adopting you? That's a hard question.
Yeah, that is a difficult question to answer. I'm not sure I would answer that. I think that's something that I would have to ask them. I don't know that I can speak for them in that way, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in the 90s, and I don't even think that was on anyone's mind. I just, in the communities I'm in now, that's talked about a lot. And so I was just curious. I think it's a somewhat new thought, actually.
Helping them in what way? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Helping them keep their children, family preservation. So helping a mother that's feeling no other choice but adoption for whatever reason, and trying to figure out ways to help families stay together.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that's so hard probably for adoptive parents to have that mindset, I would say. Yes. And again, I don't want to put words in their mother's mouth, but I can say, and I talk about it in the beginning of my book, that, you know, she had her own very difficult journey that involved, you know, trying to conceive for many years and, you know, just desperately wanting a child to complete her family. So I think, you know, I would imagine that that could be really difficult for an adoptive parent to kind of go into a situation like that with that mindset. But I do think that that's a very valid question, and that's something that people are giving more and more thought to now.
Right, right, exactly. Thank you. I know that's a hard one. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a tough one, but that's good. Thank you for asking the question. Yeah, don't be afraid of your questions.
Okay.
Okay, and then next up we have Wendy.
Hi, Al. I was curious if you could elaborate more on your reunion with your birth mother and your birth family.
Yes, I would love to. I would love to. So that was a really special experience for me. I have to say I was very fortunate to have both a successful birth family search and a very positive reunion experience. You know, that said, there's still a lot to process and unpack from both of those very life-changing events. But that reunion was just a very special day that I will always remember. I was in the hotel and where I was staying in Romania. And it was actually funny because the tour guide and translator who I was with was actually the same person who did my birth family search. So it was kind of cool that he was really a part. He was with me every step of the way. And at first he said, you know, do you want to kind of come downstairs while everybody's here? You can kind of make this grand entrance. And I'm like, no, that sounds terrifying. No, thank you. I would much rather, you know, sit and wait in the restaurant of the hotel and just kind of like collect my thoughts a little bit and just sit here. I don't care if we're sitting here for an hour. I'd rather just be here and let them walk into the room. So we were sitting at this table in the restaurant, and there was this kind of wall right in front of the table. So basically when they were coming in, I couldn't really see them. So it was kind of like this big reveal as each person walked in. It was very interesting. And the second my birth mother walked in, she grabbed my face and she said, Adriana, Adriana. And they actually referred to me as my birth name the entire trip, which I actually was kind of heartwarming in a way. It didn't feel awkward to me that they were referring to me by this completely foreign name. It was actually kind of endearing, if that makes sense. And it was just very sweet. And she just kind of held my face and she kept saying my name with tears coming down her face. And, you know, we kind of embraced, and it was this really nice connection. And I didn't feel uncomfortable around her or awkward. It was actually a very comfortable feeling. And I actually felt bad that she was so emotional. And I just kept saying, you know, please don't cry, please don't cry. And we sat down at the table, and, you know, what I thought was just going to be my birth mother and my birth sister ended up being them, their spouses, my birth sister's children. So it was a much larger group than I had anticipated, which was a little overwhelming, as I'm sure you can imagine, but it all worked out very well. And actually, if I could, I'm trying to actually find a picture. I have a picture of our very first meeting, which I can share. I was actually trying to pull some pictures.
I was just going to ask you that because you've got some great pictures in your book.
Yes, thank you.
They're
Yeah.
beautiful.
Let me see, can I share my screen, or do you need to share my screen?
Yeah, I gave you authorization, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, let me see here. Okay, yeah, let me share my screen.
Yeah, there's one shot. They really captured the moment.
So can you guys,
Wow. So beautiful.
can you see this
Yes, we
picture?
can see it.
Yeah, so this photo, Daniel, my tour guide and translator, he took this photo, and it was just such a nice moment. And I think that kind of comes across as you look at it. But we were just kind of both like holding each other's face and having this moment. And both she and all the women who came actually had these big, beautiful bouquets of flowers. So you're seeing one bouquet, picture like 5 other bouquets like that, because they all came with these beautiful flower arrangements. And actually right behind that picture is, you'll see a photo of that courthouse that I referenced earlier. And that's a photo of my parents actually standing in front of the courthouse once my adoption was finalized. And that's me on the right, actually visiting that same courthouse all these years later. So I thought that was kind of cool to share. And I just wanted to share that with you. Sharing for a second. And, you know, I want to talk a little bit about uncovering my roots and finding out that I was Gypsy and born into this community that's very culturally different. And, you know, going back to, I think the importance of acknowledging your birth identity, I think is really important. It was never disclosed to me that those were my roots. And, you know, I asked my mother, you know, like, why did you never tell me this? You know, I wanted to know, like, I'm just so curious, because I didn't even know if she knew. And she said, yes, I did know, but I didn't want you to feel there was any stigma around that. And I thought that response was really interesting, because I felt quite the opposite. I didn't feel any stigma around that. I felt, if anything, you know, as adoptive parents, I think it's important to really share the whole story with your child, and never feel like you need to hide details about the past or their story. And it's kind of really up to the adoptee, right? How we process that and how we handle it. And you know, I don't blame her, but I do think that it's something to make note of. And I think it's something that adoptive parents can, you know, just make sure to disclose all the details with their children. But finding that out was really life-changing, because I was able to learn so much about the Gypsy culture, which was really important to me, because what did I know about people who are Roma? You know, they're certainly not a common sight in New Jersey. So I knew nothing about Gypsies, and I really wanted to learn more. And that was a big part of my trip too. You know, just learning about the traditions and the culture. And that was just so insightful to me. You know, I learned things that, like, women really have little to no education, and they don't have access to the same things as men do. And arranged marriages are still practiced as early as age 12 or 13. So finding these things out, just, you know, it blew my mind, and it just made such a difference. And finding out that I had a birth sister was really huge for me. And I think that whole sibling piece in general is a really powerful thing. Growing up as an only child, you know, I had always wanted a sibling, and I always wanted a sister. And finding out all these years later that I had a sister was just, it was such a mind-blowing thing. And she was living across, you know, in a completely different place, living such a different life. And, you know, having a relationship with her now is, you know, it's both a joy and a pain, because I look at, you know, there are so many factors that make it so difficult to carry out this relationship that I would love to have with her. You know, there's the language barrier, there's these cultural differences, there's time zones, there are all of these things that international adoptees, you know, kind of run into. But, you know, it's hard, because I really I love this very simplistic relationship that we have, and I wish it could go so much further, which it really can't. But I hope that one day I can go back to Romania and visit her and spend time with her, and I can just, be there for her in the way that I can right now, and be supportive to her, which is what I try to do. So I'm really grateful that we've been able to have a relationship and communicate through tools like Google Translate and Facebook Messenger, and that's pretty much how we communicate. So I'm really grateful that we're able to carry out a relationship.
Jennifer, you had a question earlier.
Yes. Well, just was curious, since you were with your mother until you were 2, and you had this name that you knew, one, why did your parents change your name? But it's changed now. But have you ever thought about incorporating it back into the name you use today?
Great question. Yeah, I've gotten that question a couple of times, why my parents decided to change my name. And I think that's, again, it's a hard question to answer because, that's really something that I would have to direct towards them. But I do know that I was named after my father's mother. So there was some, personal connection to my name. And I think they just really wanted to have that opportunity to, have that chance, just like you would with any child, to name your child. And they wanted to take part in that, just like anybody would. But it's funny with the name Adriana, not only did everyone refer to me as Adriana on my trip to Romania, but I found out while I was there that so many relatives of mine actually have the name Adriana, and it was all going back to me. And it was like they all kind of, in honor of me and because of everything that happened, they wanted to carry out this name Adriana, which I thought was so beautiful. I was like so moved by that. Even my birth sister's daughter is named Adriana, and then other relatives as well. I kept seeing this name, and I was just like, that can't be a coincidence. Why is everyone's name Adriana? So I thought that was a really beautiful thing that was carried out throughout the family.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Oh, I thought I saw a hand. Yes. David, do you have another one? David P?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I don't know if you mentioned it, Yael, but did you meet your birth father, or did you want to?
So that's a great question. And it's so funny too, because I actually don't mention my birth father in my book at all. And I was so curious to see if anybody would ask about my birth father, and not many people have, which is also interesting. But yes, so in terms of meeting my birth father, it was not something I wanted to pursue, I think, for a number of reasons. So one, kind of knowing the history behind, knowing the history of his abusing alcohol and abusing my mother, that was one factor that kind of, made it so that I really didn't have a desire to meet him. Two, my birth mother actually asked me to please not reach out to him because she was very scared about that for safety reasons. And three, so the way that it's set up there, where my birth family lives, they live in these really small villages. So everybody knows everybody. It's just a very small community. And I think to some degree, I was nervous that if I reached out to him, that it may cause some just disruption, or it just may cause some drama and chaos, to be totally honest. you know, where they were living. And I didn't want to put my birth mother in any danger. I didn't want there to be, you know, just any further disruption in their life. You know, I kind of felt like, I kind of picture all the time what that day was like for her when Danny knocked on her door, because I just replay that in my head over and over again. I mean, imagine like you're going through your daily life, right? You're just going through your normal routine. It's a Saturday. You're just walking around the house. And then you just get this knock on the door. And it's this complete stranger. And he's inquiring about your child that you put up for adoption 28 years ago. I mean, that is just such a bomb to drop on someone, right? Like I just replay that in my head so often. And I mean, I'm so glad that he did that. And I'm so glad that she was willing to talk to him so openly about what had happened and about me and her experience and her story. But I just, you know, I feel that weight sometimes, you know, and that intensity. And I felt it on the trip too, you know, I felt like she, you know, I just felt like I was such a disruption to her life. And while I knew she was so happy that I found her and so happy for this meeting, and likewise, I couldn't help but feel this like level of guilt that I just totally threw her world upside down. And, you know, there was this other really intense moment that I talk about in my book. And it was the last full day that I was in Romania. And I could tell that it was getting really hard for her to say goodbye now that that was really coming close. And she was getting all worked up. I didn't know what was going on because they're speaking Romanian. I have no clue what they're saying. And she's going on and on to other family members. And they're going back and forth in Romanian, very heated. And then it comes out that she's a heart condition. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't have a heart attack. Like it was a very intense moment and I didn't know what to do. And Danny just says to me, we got to go now. And I was just like, okay, I'm following you in the car. Like it was heartbreaking is really what it was. Because it was like, now I entered her life and now she has to say goodbye all over again. And it was just this really intense moment. And it just kind of goes back to what I was saying that, you know, I felt like I really just turned her whole world upside down. And I felt so sad when I was going back to the hotel room that night and packing. I was just like, you know, I didn't regret the trip. I didn't regret meeting everyone. There was no regrets. I just, you know, I felt a little heartbroken for her. And, you know, that night as I was unpacking, all of a sudden I get these alerts on my phone. I'm like, what's going on? My phone's blowing up here. And all of a sudden it's these relatives from the family. They have this huge family. It's like, hi, I'm your first cousin. I just heard about you. Hi, I'm so-and-so. Like, I've heard so many stories about you my entire life. Like, I can't believe you're here and you're in Romania and you reconnected with your birth mom. My mind is like spinning. I couldn't believe all of these messages that I was getting. But at the same time, these were people who wanted to get to know me. They were excited by the fact that I, you know, reconnected in some way, and they were all trying to get to know me, and they're all calling me Adriana. And it was just, it was a very cool feeling that all these people were kind of coming together and wanting to connect. And I still speak to some of these relatives actually today, which is really nice. So there's a question.
Okay, yeah, we've got a couple of questions here. Let's see. Tina Brown is asking, how has your relationship with your adoptive parents been impacted by your reunion and subsequent information you have learned to date?
Great question. Yeah. I will say that it was very difficult for my mother to take it all in, that I was doing a birth family search, my trip to Romania. It was very hard for her. And adoption has always been a very sensitive subject for her. Growing up, I mean, I'm literally talking about whenever the subject of adoption came up, her eyes would just well with water. And I have such a clear image of that. And it was just a painful subject for her to talk about. And, you know, approaching that conversation wasn't easy. And I thought about it and I said, you know, how can I be strategic here, right? So I called her therapist and I said, listen, can you help me facilitate this conversation? I think it would be helpful to just kind of have somebody else a part of this, and you can also help her process things, you know, before and after. So I kind of went that route, and, you know, we had this call, and I think it was really helpful to do it that way. And I think my mom's come a long way in terms of showing her level of support. And not that she was never supportive, but I think she's really shown it a lot more, I would say, in the past couple of months. I think as my book came out and as I've been doing more speaking engagements and connecting with others in the adoption community, I think she's really become more comfortable with it all. Because back then it was so different. It was so different when I was growing up. There wasn't this community, this adoption community. There weren't these levels of support that there are now. People just didn't talk about it so openly and so supportively. So it's really, she's really made a lot of progress, and I feel like we've become closer. I think she's even on this call tonight, and she's been really trying to show her support by, you know, engaging in all of these conversations and participating. So she's come a long way, and I think our relationship has strengthened from that.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. We have a couple in the chat bar. Okay, Ann B, would you like to take yourself off of mute?
Hi, try to turn on my video. So I am an adoption specialist, and I have also adopted 2 children. I have changed both of my children's names just primarily for safety reasons. So I just wanted to share that. And then you had answered my question already about just staying in touch with your biological family. And then I also was curious if you received any memorabilia or any pictures from when you were prior to being adopted, just from those early years.
Yeah, you know, yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. So it was kind of interesting. I noticed that when I visited my birth family, in their homes, there were no pictures like anywhere. And I thought that was so interesting because in my house growing up, I mean, there was like a shrine of Yael everywhere. And maybe that was because I was an only child. But nonetheless, there were just photos everywhere. And even in my home, you know, there's photos everywhere you look. So I thought it was really interesting that there were no photos to be found anywhere. I never got to see a photo of me as a baby or any photos like that. What I did prepare for my birth mother was actually a photo album of photos of me growing up. And that was kind of a really special thing that I was able to present to her. And this way she had the chance to really see me grow up and really see that I had, you know, a healthy and a happy and fulfilling life. So that was kind of a cool gift that I was able to present to her. On the flip side, there was actually something that she gave me, which was really special and meaningful. she actually gave me a traditional Roma or Gypsy dress. And she and other family members got to actually dress me in it. And I have a video of it, and I'm trying to find it right now. That would be really cool to share with you all, because the joy on her face was just something that I'll never forget. And she's not a person that smiles much, but when she presented me with this this traditional dress, it made her world. And I did find the video, so if you guys would like, I could share that with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just ignore my awkwardness in this video. All right, here we go. Let me share my screen. Screen share, here we go. Okay, can you guys see this? Okay, here we go.
Daniela, spune-ne un pic acum ce facem noi aici? Ne bucurăm de venirea lui Adriana?
Adriana, da.
Și ce pregătești acolo? Ce ai aici?
Uite, aici am să gănesc o rochiță așa faină.
Da. Și o îmbraci acum în rochia țigănească? Foarte frumos.
Sade pe Maria.
Tell her maybe I shouldn't have eaten so much.
Zice, speră că poate nu ar fi trebuit să mănânce prea mult ca să fie rochița.
Adriana,
We'll make it fit.
Potrivește cumva. Și bine, cât de cât, dar nu împiți să...
îi facă mai scurtă dacă vrea.
Lasă-te.
Mai scurtă, să fie mai scurtă dacă
You can make it a bit shorter if necessary.
How does it look?
Look, look. Put the shawl. Trebuie și ăla, shawl-ul. Am învățat-o cum să și-l pun acolo.
Și că nu poți mică când iau dată, baticul
tot baticul, ați văzut cum pot.
Do I look pretty?
Și arăt frumos?
Da.
Da. Yes.
Și n-am mai șulat căcutul.
N-am mai șulat.
Și în cap.
Ok.
Îi place, îi place. Să aibă experiența complet.
Uite așa. Ui, să cărmăs. Ia, voi la moară. Păpușa.
You look like a dog. You look like a dog, she said. Păpușa. This is how the dress, the costume of the Roma.
Take a picture of me in this.
Now this was a video.
Yeah, so there's just a little video that I love to watch because as you could see, they were all so excited to dress me in this. And I was able to take it home and it's in my closet and it was a really special gift that she gave me.
That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That was a beautiful moment. I can only imagine the thoughts in your head at that time.
Yes.
It was beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, let me get back on track here. David had another question. David P.
I feel like I'm monopolizing the questions. I'm sorry. But you were saying how sad you were when you went back to the hotel, you know, the last night. And yeah, I'm emotional too. So now I'm looking at Marcy and she's making me get more emotional. So stop. So was part of your, you know, your sadness the last night, that you were going home and, you know, back to your, like, I don't know how to say it, but, you know, like, we have a pretty privileged life here in the United States. And was that part of it? And, you know, and leaving your mother and, you know, family behind, your birth family behind.
Yeah, well, one thing I will say is, you know, once you experience reunion, I mean, it changes your life forever. And I think once you return home from a reunion, especially one that involved so much, you know, so much travel, so much cultural differences, so much, you know, intensity that I experienced, you're constantly in this state of reflection. So, you know, it's like at random moments in time, you'll just have this thought spark in your head, or this like flashback of something that somebody said or somebody did on that trip. And you know, you have to take the time to process that and really unpack that and think about that. And I think that's really important. And I'm still doing that. And it's 2 years later, and I'll just wake up in the middle of the night and just think of something and I can't turn it off. There was this one moment on the trip, to kind of speak to your point, where I went to the bathroom in my sister's house, and I opened the door and my birth mother was standing right there. And I was like, whoa, hi, okay. And she pointed to the toilet in the bathroom and she said, toilet, me no toilet. And I was like, did she just tell me that she doesn't have a toilet? And I, you know, it was something where I stopped and I was like, is that possible? Did she just tell me that she didn't have a toilet? Because that's not something that we, you know, that's something that we just take for granted, right? And I got in the car and I asked Danny, and I was like, Danny, is it possible that she doesn't have a toilet? And he said, yeah, it's very possible. And I later found out that she does not have a toilet in her house. And that something like that, like, just ate me alive for a really long time. And I said, I don't know how, I don't know when, but I'm going to make sure that my birth mother has a toilet in her house. And, you know, I kind of just, it just killed me that she didn't have something so basic like that. And I said that, you know, if I can improve her life in some way, I'm going to do it. And I did. And I reached out. Danny was a huge help to me. And he, you know, found out the cost of a toilet in Romania and whatever. So all those details. And I was able to get her a toilet. And I mean, that's such a small thing, but, and, you know, that was just something that I could do. And going back to what I said about my sister, you know, speaking to her is such a joy and such a pain at the same time, because I look at her and every conversation that we have, I say to myself, like, this could have been my life. And she doesn't have an easy life. There is a lot of hardship there on many levels, financially, emotionally, socially, mentally. She has such a difficult life. And every time I talk to her, I say that could have been me, and I could have, you know, and that was the life that I could have had. And, you know, that's heavy. That's heavy to think of that. And I guess, you know, my advice to other adoptees who, you know, may have a similar feeling like that, or maybe experiencing some level of survivor guilt, you know, which I later learned about, you know, you do what you can. You know, boundaries are important, but, you know, you do what you can, and you kind of have to take things for what they are. And, you know, be supportive in the way that you can. And, you know, it's not everything is financial, right? A lot of it is just showing that emotional support and showing that mutual level of interest and love and, you know, caring, and just being there for my sister, talking to her. I mean, she communicates how alone she feels, and she has this huge family, but she feels so alone, and she's always felt so alone. She says until she found me, she felt so alone. And I wish I could be there for her more. And that's another very difficult thing that, you know, I try to work through. And I hope that one day I can go back and really spend time, and this trip would be more about quality time rather than just meeting everybody and kind of taking that in and learning. Like, I would really love to just spend that quality time.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Shall we try this again? Is it Caracella?
It's Charicella.
Caracella, sorry.
That's okay. Let's see. I don't remember what my question was now. But I guess like I do have a new question. So do you know like if there's, because like, you know, in the United States, you know, there's a lot of like adoption support community support group things, and like there's this meeting and stuff. Like I get the invite every single week. This is my first time I've attended one of these meetings. But do you know if there's support for birth mothers in Romania, or like, you know, like counselors and all that stuff in Romania?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I do know that there's not a whole lot of resources that she's able to really conveniently access, unfortunately. And I think that makes it really difficult too. And, you know, in her community, she didn't tell anyone about the adoption outside of the family, because she had so much judgment and shame, and she had to carry that really heavy burden for so long. And a big part of meeting her was to tell her that, you know, I'm grateful for your decision, and that you don't need to feel like that. And I don't have any ill feelings towards you whatsoever, because she had to carry so much on her. And, you know, she was so afraid that I thought ill of her, and that it was about love, which it wasn't about. And it was just, you know, they just don't have the same resources and support in their community, which is unfortunate.
Okay, let's see. We do have a question about, oh, have you done DNA? And maybe you could learn your paternal heritage without danger. Have you considered that?
No, you know, I that did not even cross my mind. But yes, that is definitely something to think about. Thank you. It is interesting. I will note that when I returned home from my trip, a random relative actually messaged me just the picture of my birth father. Literally the message was the photo, and it just said, "This is your father." That's what the person wrote. And I was like, whoa, okay. So, and then I quickly sent that over to my birth sister, and I said, is this true? Like, is this my biological father? I wanted to confirm it. And she said, yes. So I actually have this picture on my phone of my birth father, which is very random.
Okay, and then next we have Rhea. She has a question, then Peter, you're next.
Oh, did we lose her? You're muted, Marcy.
Rhea, are you there?
I can read you the question.
Okay.
It was more of a comment, really. It's just that Rhea said she was adopted at the age of 8. And when I was adopted, and we didn't have a toilet in the house either. So you're not the only one that came from that situation.
Thanks for sharing, Rhea.
Okay, and then Peter.
I I'm just trying to pronounce your name again. Yael, is that correct?
Yes, Perfect.
There's so many things that you're saying that's resonating with me. The name. My name didn't change as far as my pre-adoption name. My name was Peter before and after adoption, but that came from my mother. On my father's side, I would have been, as per Italian naming rules, I would have been Fabio. I have a younger brother who got that title, and had I been acknowledged, then he would have been Giuseppe. And I went back to Italy to visit my father's grave, and he also came from a small village. So I resonate with what you're saying about village life. And before I went there, I was concerned about how I would have felt alone in a small village, and no, I could not been able to speak the language and everything. And a cousin in Australia here said to me, no, just knock on the first door you come to. They'll know who you are. And or just speak to kids in the street playing. They'll all know who you are. And it was true. And and as you said, the amount of people who contacted me saying I'm your cousin, and it's just amazing. My Facebook is covered in Capamolas and other names, Carnivales, and they're all interrelated. And it's just amazing. And the DNA, I found out at 59 by DNA that I was adopted. So DNA is very important. When I was in Italy, I have 2 surviving aunts, and I got the DNA off my aunt in Italy while I was there. I did a DNA test with her. The other family declined. They didn't want any secrets. They didn't want to know any secrets. But that's been important. And when I started, no one had a family tree of our family. And now that is just spread. I started building it. The next thing, other cousins, they started getting their DNA done. And we've got an extensive tree now. So DNA is interesting. Just depends how many people in Romania do DNA, I guess.
Right. No, that's remarkable. And everything you're saying, having all of these people kind of out of nowhere want to connect with you, right? It's kind of, it's overwhelming and kind of nice at the same time. It's kind of endearing. And yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your story. It's and that video was gold.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, I have a question, if I can jump in. It's about chapter 10 in your book.
Okay.
My Roma Roots.
Okay.
Okay. You'll be quick on your feet on this one. But I want you to talk about that sense of guilt that you got when you were first introduced to that word. Tell them about that.
You're talking about survivor guilt?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
When you were, with Robert, that scene with Robert.
Yes.
So and how guilty you felt about that. Yeah.
I did. Yes. So when I was communicating with the attorney who handled my adoption, he said to me in one of our many conversations, I think, based on some information, maybe it was the name, I don't know what it was, but he said that there is a good chance that I was Roma. And I was like, what's Roma? And he said, gypsy. And, when I first heard that word, I didn't know how to feel about that. I had mixed feelings about it. I didn't know. The only thing I knew about gypsies were that they have always been very negatively portrayed cinematically. And, it was kind of upsetting. And he said, that's not a bad word. It's not a dirty word. Like, don't react, like poorly or by anything like that. And I said, no, I wanted to take the opportunity to educate myself because I really was ignorant about gypsies and I didn't know anything. And what I found out was that my birth family, they were such warm and welcoming people. They're beautiful people. And, their culture is beautiful. there are a lot of cultural differences. And that's been really interesting to learn about and see. But I felt this like level of guilt afterwards, just feeling, I guess just having that question in my head about, being a gypsy and what that meant. And, now I feel so different about it. And I'm proud of my roots, and I'm proud of my upbringing. There's nothing to be ashamed about. And nobody should ever feel ashamed of the way that they were brought up. And that kind of just goes back to what I said, that it's so important to acknowledge your birth identity, because that was such a big piece of my story. And if I didn't know about my birth identity, and I didn't know about the Roma community, I just never would have had this sense of appreciation for my life right now, and for the ability to have an education, the ability to marry who I wanted to marry, the ability to have a full-time job. I mean, there are just things that I would never have had the opportunity to do. And that all goes back to my birth identity and going back to that. And that's just, it's another reason why it's so hard for me to talk to my sister sometimes, because I see her life, and I just see how confined she feels, and how trapped she feels. And she feels like she has nowhere to go. And I wish I could help her more. To feel supported, and to feel that, you have every right to believe what you want, to do what you want. You can do anything that you want, and not have to justify it to your husband. You're an independent person, and you're a strong woman. And, these are values that they were not brought up with, and that are not ingrained in them. And that's hard to see. That's really hard to see, because, all I want is to be a positive role model for my daughters. And I want them to, see that women are strong, and women can do anything that they put their minds to do. They can be a mother, they can have a full-time job, they can have a book, they can do anything they want. And I think those are important values to have.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, as we're winding down the hour, do we have any other questions? We just really enjoyed having you on this evening, and I loved your story. And thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we really do appreciate the new faces that we have tonight. For those of you here for the very first time, we want to give you a big welcome as well. We are here every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'd love to have all of you back again. I believe Jennifer has put the links in the chat bar where we can follow you on social media, and your link to your book. If you're interested in that, you can purchase that off of Amazon. That's From Gypsy to Jersey. And then the Instagram, what's your Instagram?
My handle is also From Gypsy to Jersey.
Okay. So that's where everybody can find you. Okay, do we have any other questions before Jennifer does some closing slides here?
I just want to make a comment.
Sure, Amy.
It's Amy. I'm slow with technology, so my apologies. I just want to say that to thank you, Yael, I think I said that correctly, and just everyone who shared their stories, that as a mother who has adopted 2 children, you guys have provided so many, I'm going to start bawling, so many ways to help me better raise my children. Because I see the different, the different side of it. And also working in the adoption field. Again, just want to thank everyone, because it's a different side and hearing all your stories, just to better communicate with adoptive parents and to let them know that this impacts everyone. The biological families are dealing with grief themselves, and that needs to be touched on. I'm a proud mama, so I cry about my babies all the time. But I just want to say thank you to everyone.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for saying that. And, you know, I think it's so wonderful to see so many different groups and supports out there now for everyone in the adoption triad, because it's so important. I think that everybody gets that support. You know, as I mentioned earlier, my mother never had anything like this. She didn't even know there was like an adoption community when I was trying to explain to her all of these wonderful different platforms and organizations and people and groups. It was so hard for her to fathom that because she never had that. And I think more and more adoptive parents are taking those steps to, you know, get the education and just get the different awareness and perspectives and kind of just take it all into consideration, you know, when they do have those difficult conversations with their children, because it is difficult. There's nothing easy about it, but I think the conversations and the way we phrase them are just so crucial. And there are so many different ways to just show support, you know, every step of the way, from when they're little to when they get older. And, you know, sometimes it's just asking questions and showing that level of interest. Like, I always think of this episode actually from This Is Us. Do you guys watch that? Some of you, yes, maybe. Yeah, so it's a great show. And there's this episode that I always reference. And it was the episode where Randall had just, unfortunately, Randall didn't have the opportunity to meet his birth mother. She had passed, but he had this amazing opportunity to actually meet with someone who was very close to her. So he told her all these stories and all about his birth mother. And it was this really emotional meeting. And anyway, he returns, and his mom, Rebecca, you know, she was trying to find him, and she goes, Randall, I've been trying to track you down. Like, I want to know, how was your meeting? What was your birth mother like? I want to know all about her. And I get chills every time I say that out loud, because that right there is showing like the utmost level of support right there by just asking a simple question. Like, I want to know, tell me, share with me, you know, and just something simple like that is I think just such a beautiful way to show support, by asking those questions and showing interest.
Thank you. And thank you, Amy.
Yes.
We hope to see you back here. And that's one of the reasons why we're here every Friday evening. And we want to share these stories with all of you and offer support. And you're all welcome to come back anytime. So we appreciate all of you. Okay, let's go back to Jen.
I'm here.
Ready for me?
I already dropped the link into the chat for our Adoptee Path to Recovery meeting. The next meeting is Tuesday, October 5th. It is hosted by our own David B. Bull, who is an adoption and addiction specialist, and he has also been a consumer of those products. So it is open to any member and not any restrictions on what you want to talk about in there. And then the other program we have coming up, let me see if I have a screenshot for, oh, here's David's real quick. Couldn't find it. There it goes. So there's David's, and he meets twice a month. And then the next one we have coming up will be on October 12th. And that's with Dr. Joyce McGuire-Pavo. It is a reunion support group, putting yourself together after reunion. And we meet for an hour once a month, and you can bring any question. And sometimes we have a topic, sometimes not. And if so, the topic will be posted, but you can register for that on Eventbrite. Once again, that is also a free event, and I will drop the link in if anybody's interested. And then there's the link. And then Marcy, I'll bring up about your next guest.
Okay, so, we're always trying to find unique stories and share them with you every week. Well, here's another example. This gentleman is not an adoptee. He is the son of an adoptee. His mother was adopted. And he's got a really interesting story, how he was the one that went over and did the search and got the pieces to his story. So we're going to learn all about that and his work in the adoption community. He's also written several books. One of them I'm currently reading called My Little Valentine. It's the story of a mother and daughter's lost love. He's going to talk a lot about the Willows maternity home. We're going to learn all about that. So this is a different relationship and a unique story that we'll be bringing to you next Friday. So you want to make sure that you attend that with us as well. Okay, well, that's a wrap for me. Again, we appreciate all of you attending tonight for this happy hour. And Yael, thank you so much for coming. And we hope everybody has a great weekend. And we'll see you next Friday.
Thanks for having me. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.